and I lost everything. And on top of my investments, I also lost the job that I loved. So that's the story in and of itself. But the long and the short of it is that I was able to come back from that. I did some fix and flip. I purchased a small mobile home park, did some spec home building, and lost it all again.
Hello, and welcome to the Freedom Blueprint with Adrienne Green. Join me, Adrienne, as we explore powerful systems and strategies to achieve financial freedom through real estate investing. Ready to elevate your investing game? Let's get started.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Freedom Blueprint. And today I have with me Dr. Alan Lomax. Thank you so much for joining me today.
I'm so glad to be with. Appreciate the invitation.
And so, as you guys know, or may have seen, there's someone else here. Yes, we are starting to have podcast guests. Very exciting to share with you the wisdom and knowledge regarding real estate investing from more people. So be sure to tune in, continuing on as we get to interview amazing people in the real estate investing space. So starting with Dr. Alan Lomax, he is the founder and CEO of Steed Talker Capital, and he's proof that resilience and smart investing can transform lives. He has a PhD in organizational systems psychology and over 30 years of experience. Alan, I'd love to just have you tell us about your journey and how you got to where you are today.
Well, thank you for asking. My story is not a whole lot different than many other individuals who are in real estate. I loved what I was doing. I loved being a professor of psychology, and it has always brought me a great deal of fulfillment. And I've never wanted to leave that profession. I guess that is somewhat different than a lot of people who go into real estate who can't stand what they're doing. And so they're looking for an out from that. So I was interested in developing wealth beyond what a professor's salary could do. And real estate just seemed like the most logical way to do that. Well, I did it just by the seat of the pants. I didn't really have a plan. I didn't really have a whole lot of education. I just jumped into it, essentially. I was working at the University of Guam as a professor there, and I bought a piece of raw land in Colorado, where I was from. I had a home built that had a mother-in-law suite, and I did that intentionally so that I would have a place to go to when I was back here in the States. Unbeknownst to me, that is what has become known as house hacking. I had a tenant paying for the mortgage, and I had a place to come where I could stay rent-free when I had a chance to get back here in the States. Well, that worked out really quite well. And of course, the property appreciated over the 5 years that I owned it, and while I was there in Guam, and that was a nice surprise as well. So I came back to the States, ended up in South Texas, and I just continued that process. Essentially bought a home that was much bigger than what I needed, and I divided it into a triplex, and so had tenants paying my mortgage once again. And I just continued that. And within just a few years, I had developed a considerable amount of wealth that I had never anticipated, and which was a little bit surprising to me. I really didn't start my career until I was 42 years old, but that's a whole different story. So I had a late start in life. But within just a few years, I had really developed a lot of wealth. And then 2000, and I lost everything. And on top of my investments, I also lost the job that I loved. So that's the story in and of itself. But the long and the short of it is that I was able to come back from that. I did some fix and flip. I purchased a small mobile home park, did some spec home building, and lost it all again. And so I decided I can't keep starting all over. If I were 25 years old, maybe I could do that. But at 60, it's just a little bit late to keep starting all over again. And so I started getting educated. I joined some mastermind support groups, started listening to podcasts, started studying, and I discovered commercial real estate. And that was the solution I needed. It had the security, the stability, and most of all, the scalability, which, believe me, I needed at 60 years of age, though. So that's the long and the short of the story. We can go into any of that you'd like to, or move on to other things. So I'll let you take it from there.
Wow, I love hearing your story and how honest you are about the challenges that you faced along the way. So often I think a challenge we have in the real estate investing space is people go out and they only share their best days, right? It's like the whole issue with social media and everything like that. We're going to just share our wins. And it gives people a very skewed perspective. And when they face challenges like you did, they're like, oh, well, I'm just going to quit and walk away. So I'd love to kind of dive into more of, obviously your biggest lesson learned from your challenges was getting into commercial, and you shared a little bit about those benefits. I'd love to again dive into those lessons learned, how they could apply to other people, how you persevered through those losses, because it is a challenging real estate market right now. And I bet a lot of people would love some wisdom as they may be facing similar trials.
Well, it was a hard road back emotionally and psychologically more than anything else, because I was supposed to know something, a little bit about psychology. And yet here I'm faced with all the shame and humiliation and guilt, and I didn't deal with it very well. So I had to go back to the drawing board myself. And the first thing I had to do was really to forgive myself and to give myself the unconditional positive regard and empathic understanding that I would give to a friend or a family member who was in the same situation that I was in. And from that perspective, then I also had to take a look at my mindset, which was when I'm down in the dumps like that, and where I had spent a great deal of my life is with a very fixed mindset. And I had to challenge that and realize that this is a growth opportunity. It's not the end of the world. And that shift in thinking that this is an opportunity for growth was a total and complete game changer in and of itself. And I'm not going to go into a whole lot of what all that entailed, but there certainly was a lot that was entailed in that. There was counseling, there was the work with horses, and that's really where the name of my company has come from. And they were such a powerful impact at that particular time in my life. They still are today, actually. Well, with all of that in place, you had said the one major lesson I learned was commercial real estate. Well, I found commercial real estate was the way out of it. That wasn't really the big mistake. The big mistake was over leveraging. And there's all kinds of gurus out there still to this day that just say, just leverage to the max. Well, of course, leverage is a critical component of real estate, and it's one of the aspects of real estate that make it the wonderful vehicle that it is. But like anything, it can be misused and overused, and that is exactly what really happened to me. That was the one thing. The other thing was that I was purchasing all of these properties really at market value, and they were cash flowing, just barely, but they were cash flowing. And that was okay as long as I had a really good salary to support all of that. It worked out fine. The two lessons are you make your profit when you buy, and so don't be buying at market value. And the second thing is use leverage wisely and smartly. And if you're going to use leverage, you also have to accompany that with a respectable amount of reserves. And so those major lessons that I learned, and those are the things that I apply today that keeps me above water and will keep me above water when this next recession hits, and who knows when that's going to be. It will, but we know.
Right. Well, and those are great lessons. I actually was just speaking to an investor who had been in the Galveston market and ended up having to sell her properties there because, of not having enough reserves. So there's a great point there. They had a bad hurricane during the high season recently, and that really affected the numbers. I'd love to hear, what does good leverage look like to you now?
Well, since I'm in the commercial real estate, I mean, leverage is typically about 30%. Sometimes we see 20%, very rarely, but Between 25 and 30% is what I mean. That's where I would like to see the equity part of that. And the lending part is anywhere from 70 to 75%. And the other measure of that is, can the property sustain itself with, say, 25% vacancy rates? Can we still make the mortgage payments? Rarely does that happen in multifamily, but I want to be assured of the fact that if market rents drop, if actual tenancies drop, and we drop down there to 25% vacancy rate, that we can still make those mortgage payments. That's what I feel like is good leverage.
Those are great numbers. Thank you so much for sharing that. So, I'd love to hear more about your transition to commercial real estate. It's funny. I've been a real estate agent. I've helped so many investors buy, and so often people buy their first investment property and they think they're going to have it until they die. Then they're going to pass it off to their heirs with a step up in basis. And then you get a few years down the line and you start realizing, hey, I'm going to pivot strategies. I'm getting to 1031, things like that. So I'd love to hear about your transition between strategies and the lessons in that could be out there for our listeners.
There's a lot of people out there in the single family space, and that's a good place to be. And if you like that and if you're enjoying that, there's no reason to leave that. The reason that I left it was because I did go back into teaching. And so I had a full-time job and I didn't need another full-time job. And so I wanted something that I could do passively. And so in looking at commercial real estate, I realized that there are opportunities for passive investors. We're always looking for limited partners. And so that's a perfect place for people who are fulfilled in what they're doing and they don't want their lifestyle interrupted, and they have accumulated a sizable amount of investment capital. This is the perfect place to. When I stepped into commercial real estate, I had been very active in the single family. I was in the acquisition, I was in the renovation, I was working with contractors, I was working with tenants, I was working with property managers, I was doing the whole shebang. So when I decided I'm going to a commercial real estate, I thought, well, I'm going to do the same thing with that. And so I started looking around for multifamily opportunities. I started working with realtors and was in a mastermind group and working with other investors involved in these. And I started putting through offers to purchase. And I soon began to realize that I really don't want to do that. I don't enjoy that. It's time consuming. It takes developing huge amounts of networking. And the other thing that I don't really enjoy about that is once you have a place under contract, then you have to really get serious about the underwriting.
Here's a word from our sponsor. Are you an active real estate investor feeling overwhelmed by endless tasks? Workergenics is here to help with their full-service virtual staffing solutions. They're offering a free tool called the Delegate or Die Checklist, which outlines 100 tasks you as a real estate investor can delegate to a virtual assistant. Imagine focusing on the big picture while your VA handles the details. Gain the freedom and efficiency you deserve in your investments. Download the Delegate or Die Checklist now at workergenics.com/freedom blueprint. That's workergenix.com/freedom blueprint. Take control of your time and boost your productivity today. Now, back to our show.
And then you have to go into the due diligence process, and then you have to continue working with property managers and oversee that. And then you have to develop your asset management skills. And so I started looking around at all of that, and I realized that I don't want to do any of that. On top of not wanting to do any of that, there are hundreds of very successful syndicators out there who already have all of those systems in place, and they're doing a good job at it. And what they need is capital. And so they need people to raise capital for them. And I'm going, that's the perfect place for me. And not only was it the perfect place for me, but it also gave me the opportunity to do what I also love, and that is to give opportunities to others. And so that's where that's where Streams to Impact, our investment program came from, was like, I can develop this program. I can put a platform out there where other people like myself who are fulfilled in what they're doing, whether it is in their professions, whether they are investing in single family homes and have built a successful business in that. This is the place that once they have become established, once they have capital to invest, they need a place to put that capital. And commercial real estate is the perfect place to put that. It's much more stable than stocks or bonds. It returns higher rates of return than stocks or bonds do. And then your investors are familiar with real estate. We know it's the ideal investment because of the income, the depreciation, the equity, and the leverage, and all of those things making it the ideal investment. Plus, it is that hedge against inflation, is recession resilient, and, best of all, tax liability reduction. All of those ideal aspects of real estate investing carry over to commercial real estate. So you don't lose any of that, but you have, as a LP or a limited partner, a passive investor, you have no management. And the process is no more difficult than investing in the stock market. That's how I got into it. And soon after getting into it, I realized I can help other people to do the same thing. So it's been a wonderful journey.
I love that. And I love how you realized where your niche was. And, your story is similar to so many people's. You get into it and you do everything yourself. And so many people hit that wall where they don't, what gets you here isn't what's going to get you there. Right. And they just struggle with that pivot. So I wonder, can you share for people who maybe have hit that wall, that ceiling of what they can do on their own, or realizing, hey, I have given myself another job. I've given myself all these tasks that I don't necessarily enjoy, and yet they feel like it's a necessary part of being a real estate investor. If they're not doing what all those things you originally described, right? Making the offers, dealing with the contractors, dealing with the property managers, they view that as what real estate investing is. And you've presented an alternative here. I'm curious, if you could dive into the psychology with your background of helping people change their mindset around what real estate investing is. How did you make that pivot, and what lessons are there for others so that they can continue to invest in real estate and to grow and scale, and maybe pivoting their strategy or their systems when they hit that wall?
There's a number of different elements involved in there. As a real estate investor in single family homes, I was buying shacks and turning them into palaces, I found that very rewarding. Taking a shack and then you can turn around that and develop a place that is very comfortable for people to enjoy and to live in. Feels so good. It just strokes the ego a whole lot. And seeing that transformation makes a person feel really good. And then, like you said, you're involved in this, and there is gratification in productivity. And so we get all kinds of gratification from being involved in that. And then, like you said, it gets to a point in place, well, God, this was supposed to be fun. It was supposed to bring lots of money, and it's become a nightmare. It's constant work from a sun up to sunset, and then 6 and 7 hours after sunset, we're still at it. And so how do you find your way out of that? Well, you have to realize that you're doing a great and wonderful job, and give yourself credit for where you are and for what you have done. And then also, probably like most of us, there's a little bit of control freaks, I think, within each and every one of us. And we have to get to this point where we realize that we can't do it all if we're going to really scale, and we're going to have to find people who can help us with this. And being that my degree is in system psychology, it probably wasn't as difficult for me as what maybe it is for some people. I see the whole world. I see the universe as a system. The universe is a system. Our galaxy is a system within a system. Our solar system is a system within the galaxy. Our Earth and sun is a system within a solar system. Everything on this planet is a system within a system. Look at an ant colony, that's a system within a system. You look at a beehive, it's a system within the system. You look at a city, and that's a system within a county, and the county is a system within the state, and the state's a system within the national government. And all of those systems work independently but interdependently. And it's the same way with systematizing your real estate businesses. If you're doing all of this yourself, you have got a system. So in order for you to transition from that, all you really need to do is, there's lots of programs out there for systematizing these things. They didn't used to be out there. We used to do it with notepads. And the rectangle was the task. The squares were the decision points. And you just lay out what is the task and where do we go from this task? Is responsible once this task is done. And you just put out that chain of events there. Then you've got the outline there for that system. And once you have that outline for that system, then you just put it down in writing, and you can train anybody to do what it is that you have been doing yourself. You know how to do it. Just write it down, just visualize it, write it down, and then you can train anybody to do it.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. And you really set us up to start our quick fire round of questions here at the end. So you mentioned systematizing, you've highlighted it. I love that. That speaks to me for sure. And so to start off, quick fire question number one, what is the best system you've implemented in your business?
Well, I don't know if it's the best, but anyway, it was the starting point really for really scaling and really developing. It was systematizing the whole podcasting process. Like in everything, I was doing it all myself. I was attracting guests, I was inviting guests, I was scheduling guests, I was taking care of the production and post-production, I was doing the follow-ups and all of that. That was exhausting. I was doing at that point in time, I was doing 3 episodes per week. And it was a huge strain, but I continued doing it for probably almost a year and a half, and finally decided I've got to get some help here. So I have, and so I did what we just talked about. I had everything systematized. So I started looking for help, found an administrative assistant. They took it over. What a burden off my shoulders that has been. And then I also found a video producer, and he has been doing all of the production ever since then. So that whole thing is systematized from attracting to scheduling to pre-follow-up and after follow-up with guests and post-production. I don't worry about any of that any longer. So the same thing applies to our Streams to Impact program, but I had learned a little bit more by the time that I started it, and I've actually systematized it from the get-go there. But it's the same process.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I think every investor can think of what are they doing multiple times a week, that maybe there are other skilled people who can handle a lot of that work. Love it. Question number 2, what is one book every investor should read?
We were talking about mindset earlier. So Mindset is the name of the book, and it's by Carol Dweck, D-W-E-C-K. And the other is Grit by Angela Duckworth. Those aren't recent publications. I think they were published in 16, 17. But they're classics and everybody should read.
Love it. Agree. And what is your go-to tool for managing operations?
Well, our CRM has just been the godsend. And we just recently, about 6 months ago, we changed to Go High Level. The transition was not fun, but it is a very robust platform. And so that's it.
Awesome. And I think another lesson in that is don't be afraid to switch systems when you learn that there's a better one out there, even though it will be painful at the transition every time, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Well, thank you so much. And Dr. Allen, where can people reach you?
The best place to reach us is they can get hold of our exclusive high yield investment blueprint, and they can go to High Like a Building, and that's highyieldblueprint.com. So that's www.highyieldblueprint.com. bottleneck.com.
Perfect. And we'll have that in the show notes and description, guys, so you can see that written out there. Well, thank you again so much, Dr. Allen, for your time here today. And I appreciate you sharing all of your insights and your journey along the way.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.